on that one?
We are on the first break in the second day of questioning of the undercover police officer Jason Bishop, who gave evidence on Monday. He infiltrated a number of groups, including Reclaim the Streets and Disarm Dicey, Dicey being the Defence Systems Exhibition International, the arms fair in the East End of London every 2 years. He was also reported on Earth First, and we've seen internal SDS documents that claim that he was also reporting on the Wombles and campaign against the arms trade, though he somewhat denies that. I'm joined by Zoe Young from the Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance. What have you made from the fairly short section of questioning we've heard about from Jason Bishop this afternoon?
Well, it was short, but it was dense already. I mean, there was a lot of following up of some of the questioning on Monday, which got interrupted just at a key moment about commercial covert human intelligence sources.
Spies.
Basically, CHIS, they're known as in the lingo. And yeah, he was clearly interacting with a lot of them. And so that was followed up. And I was very struck by the fact that he kind of responded about how he interacted with them and with other undercover police, as if they were ordinary activists. He would report on them as if they were ordinary activists.
Specifically, the National Public Order Intelligence Unit police officers,
yes.
So not his fellow SDS officers, but
yes.
the other unit, the one that will be covered in Tranche 4, which irritatingly the inquiry is not, even though these officers are deployed at the same time, is not looking at in the during the same tranche of the hearings.
Which is creating so many more levels of opacity and confusion and time wasting. And, you know, if they just dealt with event by event or something, it would be so much easier. But, for example, he said something about the NPOIU, that they were existed to run parallel, but to actually lead to arrests, which I've never heard that before.
I've never heard that before. I mean, I think he's quite wrong about that. I'm not entirely sure why he said that. I mean, perhaps there is some basis to it. Perhaps that was one of the original intentions of it. He claimed that rather that it was supposedly to be modeled on the SDS, but instead of being purely intelligence, to have some evidential role that would result in court appearances. Now, that, to be very clear, that did not happen. They were modelled on the SDS, but as we understand it, they were simply just outside the Metropolitan Police area. That it was something that was put together by the Association of Chief Police Officers to be run by all the regional forces in the UK to deploy undercover officers into groups and organisations outside the Metropolitan Police area.
Yeah, so we have several situations today where there were commercial spies, SDS spies, NPOIU spies. It seems like they were sort of not really given any specific guidance how to interact with or report on each other, which presumably means they were then reporting on them as if they were ordinary activists. So does that mean that whatever those spies were doing in their, whatever the motivation they were being given instructions, was being used to kind of then shape the reporting of all the activists? So we need to find out this afternoon from him. We need our lawyers to be asking, you know, were they, you know, if say an SDS officer was trying to provoke firebombing or something like that, was the NPOIU then reporting, oh, these lot are all trying to provoke firebombing? And then when the commercial spies then, you know, I mean, were they kind of creating a little whirl in between each other in their own madness?
I mean, it's something we see going back to the 1970s, the use of multiple sources of intelligence. We heard about Peter Fredericks during the first phase of the inquiry, who another source, which is believed to be MI5, points out that he had a girlfriend, that the use of informers and other infiltrators reporting on the actions of undercover police within groups. But, I mean, certainly this is getting to a new level. He claims that there was never any specific briefing about who these NPOIU officers were. He came across two of them in the field, Mark Kennedy and Rod Richardson. In the case of Rod Richardson, he said he was never aware that he was an undercover officer at the time. It was only afterwards he was made clear to him.
I mean, do we believe that?
I mean, I don't believe a fucking word he says about anything.
Well, that's the problem, because we want to kind of believe some of it because it's information.
I mean, I would say, as I noted on Monday, I think Jason Bishop has been one of the more professional undercover officers when it comes to giving evidence to the inquiry, by which I mean that he does not admit to anything. He, when information is presented to him, he goes, "Oh, I don't dispute it. I don't dispute it. That I don't recall, but I don't dispute it."
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's very, very little that he claims to actually remember. Whenever any sort of activist said, "Well, you did this, you were there, you did this, you did this," he goes, "Oh, well, I agreed entirely, absolutely agree, but I don't recall it myself."
Yeah, I think we need a new thing on our bingo card for the.
Just put it that.
Does this one, yeah. I don't know if we have the I don't dispute it. It isn't on there.
Yeah, no,
that needs to be on the
there,
next round.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's an approach that other undercover officers have used, but I don't think as effectively as Jason Bishop is doing.
Yeah, and I was really struck by they spoke for the first time really properly about the Wombles.
Yes.
The white overall movement building liberationist effective struggles, which is
libertarian.
Sorry, there was always an argument about that. A libertarian liberationist, anyway. Which you spell out. It's an acronym, capitals with dots. But when I first heard about them, I thought, oh my god, actual Wombles. I mean, making good use of the things that you find. We all loved the Wombles in the 70s and that, but they were very much a response to police violence. I remember when the Wombles were created, and I was really interested in it because as someone who'd been going along to a lot of demos and was really fed up with being chased and battered and driven at and seeing more and more people coming who wanted to fight the police and fewer people coming with their kids, it was like, understandably, people want to start wearing padding. So I started wearing a helmet.
So this was taken from the Italian movement,
the
White
Tutti Bianchi.
Yeah, the white overall movement, and this thing of wearing huge amounts of padding and with a hazmat suit over the top. Often the padding being sort of like quite outlandish sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it would slightly take the piss, but it was practical.
Yeah, and then being able to be at the front of the police line, so that when the police were coming over and hitting people as is they want, then people will be able to withstand that sort of level of violence.
Yeah, I mean, I started wearing my granddad's old wartime pith helmet at that point, but I think what was kind of actually emerged in some of Bishop's evidence this morning was that the Wombles were not in themselves violent. They were about being kind of like a line of defense almost. And because we'd had situation after situation where the police would be kettling people and they'd be compressing people, as we heard very clearly from Lois earlier, who was stuck in one of these kettles while lactating, desperately trying to get back to her less than 1-year-old child. And that's a very tense situation, and people will freak out and get stressed, and the police will come in and they'll be pushing you with their shields or they'll be battering you over your head. And sorry, I get a bit tense talking about this because I was in a lot of those situations. They're bloody hard. So the idea of having a phalanx of people who are willing and able to be there with some padding, it's not in itself a violent thing. And I think he did sort of name that, which was...
Yeah, I mean, he didn't dispute. Well, one of his many did not disputes.
Okay.
One of the files that we did, one of the things we did see was a report by him, which was one of the first mentions we had at the inquiry of the Cardiff Anarchist Network, which was a group I was a member of. It suggested a very sectarian attitude from CAN, that we had been set up as a Cardiff branch of the Wombles, but had fallen out with the Wombles, believed them to be a drinking club. And not to be taken seriously, and have been ineffective at taking more confrontational action. I would say, as someone who was around at the time, that was not how I would typify the opinion of members of Cardiff Anarchist Network about the Wombles at large. There were some fairly strong fraternal links with people who were parts of the Wombles. I think certainly we maybe had a more nuanced critique of the level of action that was justified when it came to dealing with the police. I'm sure we will get into that a great deal more, but I would just say that perhaps many of the views expressed by many of the people at the inquiry from the activist movement about what is justifiable confrontation with the police and the views of Cardiff Anarchist Network may differ somewhat.
However, it's worth noting that there were a lot of undercover police involved in and around, say, the Wombles group and Cardiff, and we still don't know all of them, and we still don't know what roles they were playing in provoking different points of view, different approaches. And they were kind of, from what we can tell of a lot of them and looking at the disclosure that we've seen of their reports, they're really like kind of bitchy, gossipy, any kind of division. They will just get at it and they will stoke it, and they're just mean about people.
Yes,
and mean about people being mean about people and just building. They're like those horrible kids at school, who just want to stoke shit. Yeah,
no, I mean that's very much the case. I mean, I would also say though that when it comes to those political opinions, those political disagreements about the nature of confrontation, they're very real and they're still well held. Yeah. And the people who hold them are on screen right now. Which is,
but I love that in a way because we're all here. And, taking really different life experiences and whatever, but we're all facing this one problem that these fuckers were in and among us, stirring this stuff up. And, the fluffy versus spiky thing will go on forever, probably. When you're dealing with a bigger problem, there's going to be some people who are, let's do it all very nicely around the edges. And other people are like, right, go into the middle and just, send something right into the heart of the Death Star and blow it all up. And, that there's a need for all of these points of view to be heard. And, if we can at least have these proper conversations without a bunch of state operatives coming in and stirring it and making it harder, then at least we have a better way forward.
We started seeing actually before we get to that, we saw some of the stuff around the GM crops, and this point which I'm pleased I'm now able to make, because when I made the point on Monday, it turned out it was covered by restriction order, and it was simply the timing, nothing to do with the actual content. That the SDS management, and we had 3 officers named, Bernard Greene, HN 58 and HN 53, gave the authorization to officers to take part in the trashing of genetically modified crops. This was as a result of the September 2000 ruling about Greenpeace activists destroying a GM crop, who were then not the charges were dropped. They were not charged with it. So it was decided that within the SDS was the standard. If that was the case, then their officers could do it. And therefore, Jason Bishop took part in a large number of covert, middle of the night actions to go to GM crops and destroy them. He was given the authorization to take part in every aspect of those actions.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me. I mean, because we had, wasn't it Boiling a couple of weeks ago, saying that he and Bob Lambert, the then director of the unit, were both quite sympathetic to the anti-GM stuff. And that case with Greenpeace at the time, it was a Lord Melchett who was sort of the main face to that whole case. And also we've had somebody who's been coming up in some of the reporting about this with Hector Christie, who's very active anti-GM activist over many years. And he's also quite aristocratic. And there has always been this kind of, this kind of approach to organic farming and things, and this idea of GM as being like contamination, which is present in those actions.
Yeah, I mean, there is a whole strand of aristocratic understanding of blood and soil, and like a fascism around the countryside and purity, which I think has driven a lot of aristocrats to kind of hold these views. But I think the thing for me, which I think is the most interesting, is that this is the metric used by the SDS to decide whether its officers can break the law or not. That if the CPS decide not to charge, then it's fair game. And this way in which they decided what SDS officers could do that was illegal and what they couldn't was based very much. So they were taking their cue, they were taking their lead from the CPS, and I think there's a lot in that.
Yeah, God, there is.
After that, we got to what I feel is likely to be a fairly major part of the rest of the questioning of Jason Bishop this afternoon, which relates to the mobilisations around DICE, the Defence System Exhibition International, the arms fair in the East End of London in September every other year. And we saw the first one of that, which was the Fiesta of Life Against Death, 2001, quite a memorable protest. It was on the 11th of September 2001. And there was a lot of people who were campaigning against murder at a time when murder was back on the political agenda.
That was one of the most surreal days of my life, to be honest. I was right in the middle of that. I was actually being interviewed on Zoe Broughton from Undercurrents video when the news was coming in. And she was trying to talk to me about these questions about violence and non-violence. And we were trying to work out what this news was like. At first we thought it was like a little light plane, and I literally thought that it was like somebody as part of the anti-DICE stuff, the way I was first hearing it, had been like done a suicide mission or something into some office of one of the, and I was like, no, oh my God, and it's got bigger and bigger, and just the day just span out, and the police started spinning out. You could see that from their firm lines, blocking us in, and we're like, we're going to get kettled, what's going to happen? So they all started kind of moving in a liquid way as the news was kind of spreading around. And so half the people ended up in the pub, the rest of us went back to mine, and we were just
So I mean, we didn't get into the substantive nature of that. Hopefully, we will do in the afternoon session. Is there anything you're looking forward to in terms of questioning of Jason Bishop this afternoon?
The big one for me is the Fairford coaches.
Yes.
So on the day that the invasion of Iraq was beginning, 22nd of March 2003, I was on one of 3 coaches heading off to Gloucestershire to RAF Fairford, actually a US air base, from where the planes were taking off to go and bomb Baghdad. And we were thinking that's not right for various reasons. I was actually filming.
On the basis it's murder.
Yeah, war crimes, whatever. And the dodgy dossier, and that was really the beginning of this whole normalization of lying in politics. Everyone knew that there was no threat to us from Saddam Hussein, but that the British oil companies, etc., wanted the Iraqi oil fields. So yeah, we were kind of opposed to this, and 1 million people had marched in the streets and not been heard. So yeah, three coachloads of us were pulled over in Lechlade in Gloucestershire, quite close to Fairford, where there was an organised rally, peace rally with, AA signs where to go, and Caroline Lucas MP was speaking and everything. So they stopped us on the side of the road. They searched us for like a couple of hours. They pulled out, they arrested one of the Womble people. They pulled out all their padding, everything. They also stopped a van that was like in front of us, which turned out to be a living van. So they had some wood, like chopping gear. They tried to make out that we had weapons because somebody else had an axe for chopping their wood. So after searching us, we got back on the buses, and then they threatened the drivers with arrest unless they drove us straight back to London. And they closed the M4. We had helicopters buzzing us the whole way. All the exits and entrances to the M4 were closed. Because I was there as an indie media journalist, I was calling the BBC and saying, look, I've got this footage. This is something crazy is going on here. And the person on the line was like, wow, what a story. I'll hang on the line, I'll come back. He came back and said, we're not covering that story. Thank you, goodbye. It was the weirdest day I've ever been. We ended up making escape from the buses in traffic at Shepherd's Bush. And long story, we took a judicial review of the police decisions on that day. So I think 7 different forces were involved. And after about 10 years, we eventually won it, because they were not justified in kidnapping us. But they kept trying to say throughout that we were going equipped to cause a breach of the peace, and they couldn't possibly know who was on the buses. But it turns out they did know, because they had one undercover cop, Rod Richardson, from the NPOIU, on the buses, and another, Jason Bishop, had been in the organising group for, this was the 3rd in a series of rallies at Fairford. And though he says he wasn't there that day, he perfectly well knew who the organisers were. They had lists of people who'd signed up on the buses. So again, this is a case that the division between the tranches is causing a real problem, because I'm supposed to be one of the witnesses on that, and I'm not being called. I've not been asked to make a statement. Nothing official is happening until tranche 4, whenever that happens. However, we've got a guy now who was in the organising group for buses to Fairford, so we're trying to get some questions into him, and we're really hoping to get something out of that.
We've got a very short lunch break today, because of the nature of Jason Bishop being called in for a second day. There's been a huge amount of questioning for him. It's liable to run very late this afternoon. The hearing will start again at 2:00. The broadcast will be 10 minutes after that. I'll share the link. It's a different link from this morning that's in the description that we're reacting to. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think Tom needs some lunch. I think, make some donations to his Ko-fi. You will notice that the mainstream media is not documenting this. The more and more that I learn through being here and through watching your stuff, etc., when I'm not here, the more I realize the profound complicity of the mainstream media in a lot of these stories, and that hasn't really come up yet, and I really hope it will. But yeah, just come down, tell your friends, get down here, 10 till 5 most days, not Fridays. It's on throughout March. Give a donation to Tom. He's not a paid journalist. We're all doing this for love, and because it's the best true crime mystery you could ever have,
and also bitterness. Let's be honest. The actual experience of being infiltrated has had a profound effect on those of us who were affected, and I can't drop it. And I think that this has been a lot of the story. You talk about the Fairford coaches. We heard earlier on Lois Austin talking about the 2001 kettling on May Day. These are profound injustices that those of us have experienced, and we are not willing to drop it, and we are hounding the police on these issues for the rest of our lives, essentially.
Well, yeah, and this affects all of us, many of us on deeply personal level, but all of us on a societal, cultural, political, economic, every kind of level. So, yeah. give a donation to Tom on his Ko-fi.
It would be great. Thanks, Jodie. If you're not able to donate, I totally understand. Times are hard. We live in a cost of living crisis, but any donations will be
But spread the
used.
word as well.
Yes.
Just tell everybody. Share, like, do it.
Yes, thank you for saving me from being cringe and asking for that again. I do feel embarrassed every time I do it. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll do another video during the next break. You can follow on Twitter and elsewhere while the hearings are going on. Cheers for now. Bye for now.